Alright, my name is Zachary Bush. The date is June 10th, 2023. Here's my name, student ID, and course ID. And I am doing my results video for Microscopy for Microbiology. I'm using my phone to pull up pictures of the slides because the subjects were too small to see by eye, so there'd be no point bringing the slides up here just to show you a blank slide. There'd be no point in that. So let me bring up the first, which is an amoeba. There, let me turn the light off so for a little less glare. And here, trying to get the least amount of glare possible. So as you can see, there's an amoeba. Pink, round, flat. An amoeba is not a fungus or bacteria. It is a eukaryote, so it's unique in that way compared to all the other slides that I had. This one was fairly easy to find because it was visible by eye, so I was able to position the microscope in a way that I could see it fairly quickly. It was just using the fine adjustment knob to make sure that the magnification was at a good point where I could see it easily. Now moving on to the penicillin. Here's the penicillin. Moving back, trying to make it easier. As you can see, the penicillin is it's a very cool looking slide. It looks like some kind of graphic novel. The color shifts from like a pink to a light purple to a violet. I thought it was really cool. It was my favorite slide out of all of them because, again, I could see it. I didn't have to look in a microscope for hours on end trying to find it, and it looked by far the coolest. Penicillium is not a bacteria, and it is not a eukaryote. It is a fungus. So that, and in that way, penicillium and yeast are very similar. Now moving on to my yeast. Okay, this one's going to be difficult to see. Let me see if I can just close the curtain a little bit more to see if I can get a little less glare. Yeah, this is going to be tough. But you can see the darker blue specks. There are many more of those. They're just lighter, but it's very difficult to see with the glare. There we go. That's a better way of doing it. So just like that. And yeast, like I said, is also a fungus. It is not a bacteria or eukaryote. So in that way, it and penicillin are very similar. Yeast is used commonly for baking. Any bread you have typically has yeast in there. This one was very difficult to find as it was not visible by eye. There was no marking to indicate, all right, this is the general location of where the yeast would be. So in that way, it was very, very difficult to find. It was extremely frustrating. If I recall correctly, I was not able to find the yeast with the lowest magnification. I had to actually move up because it was so difficult to see. So I believe the first magnification I found it at was at 150x, which was extremely difficult, as you can imagine. Moving on to the spirillum. 1 minute. Let me find it real fast. I had these all saved, but for some reason, the spirillum isn't coming up. I apologize. Okay, here it is. As you can see, there is one big spot in the center, and then you can see diagonal lines running through it. The big marking in the center is the spirillum, and spirillum is it's a form of it's a bacteria, but it's in a certain shape. You have spirillum, you have bacillus, and you have coccus. Those are 3 different shapes of bacteria. Those are the 3 different slides we had: spirillum, bacillus, and coccus. And that's what I had showed today. This one was along with, I believe, coccus was by far the most difficult. More difficult than yeast, more difficult than all of them. It was so hard to find. So hard to find. Yeah, I used the grid pattern. I used everything I possibly could. Nothing I did made it any easier. Like I said, I spent hours under the microscope trying to find this, and it was absolutely miserable. Moving on to the bacillus. No, not that. Here we go. This one's going to be like the yeast, very difficult to get a good picture of. As you can see, there's little markings kind of scattered across. It just looks like fuzz on the screen, but it is the bacillus. Um, Let me see if I can lower it's the brightness of the screen. But yeah, here, let me move this around. Just do it that way maybe. That's a little better way of seeing it. But yeah, in that way, that's the bacillus form. Again, very, very difficult to find, very, very difficult to get a hold of. The last form, coccus, is right here. I was barely able to find it. As you can see here, well, it's difficult to see, but it's a very, very small purple splotch, and I struggled mightily trying to find this again, just like the rest of the bacterial forms, because of the fact they're so small and so difficult to find. There's no marker indicating this is general location you should look. Obviously, you look in the middle at the beginning, and then if you can't find it, you kind of spread out. But I had a very difficult time finding it. I will move on to my dental tartar and cheek smear, and then I'll go into real life applications. So, dental tartar right here. Oof, this is another tough one. Just move this down. There we go. That's the best way of doing it. So as you can see, they're just little straight lines. It looks very jagged, almost like little pieces of glass in there because it's so clear. The next experiment on staining would help with that a lot. But because I smeared my dental tartar on there, it was much easier to find. It looks to me that dental tartar is in the form of spirillum, and yeah. Moving on to the cheek smear real fast before I get into real life applications. Here we go. There we are. So there's a cheek smear. Again, it's a little out of focus, and I apologize for that. There's not much I can do in that scenario. But it's much less jagged, like in a spirillum shape, like the dental tartar. But ultimately, I think it was very easy to find. Got 8 minutes so far. All right. Using the swab was very easy. The dental tartar, much more in the shape of an amoeba. The real life applications of using the microscope, obviously, it will help with identifying bacteria. If you can identify the shape of a bacteria or fungus or anything like that, it'll help with narrowing down the options of what this particular sample is. And in that way, it's very helpful in a real life application. It's also very helpful in real life just for seeing cool things. If you ever tried having just a leaf under a microscope, it's very cool. The details that you can see. If you have a bug under there, like a spider or a beetle, something like that, it's very cool. You can see little hairs. Ultimately, it's just a really useful life skill, but in a clinical setting, it's very, very useful for identifying bacteria, identifying funguses, identifying things of that like. So thank you, and this is the end of the video.